So what is the problem with traditional hosting? The simplest way to look at it, something you are probably familiar with, is the ticketing system. Why do we have to open a ticket anytime a setting has to be changed with the server? Why does that barrier exist? Who is it for and who's it serving? WordPress is not a CMS. It's an application. And using 12-factor principles is a way to manage that application as you build out your supply chain from your development environment to the cloud where you serve the customers. I first started working with web hosting companies professionally well over a decade ago when my team and I were running hundreds of WordPress sites for our clients, and we had to run them on the web, always up, and we also had to make changes to them. And that's where the first cracks in the traditional hosting system begin to show, when you have to make changes to what's currently live. The web hosts would prefer for you to only have one environment, theirs. In fact, they go out of their way to make it difficult for you to have multiple environments set up for your code. Part of it is because it costs extra, but it's predominantly because they are not concerned with the process you have of making changes to your site. They're concerned with your site appearing to be up. Now, the way you actually measure if a website is up is rather complicated. It's a lot more than simply seeing that the servers are on. You have to consider customer experiences. You have to consider transactions. You have to consider updates. And all of these are not a priority for the web hosting company. They're a priority for you and your customers. So how do we fix this? When we started scaling WordPress, the first step was isolating environments. So every environment from development, staging, production, and feature branches acted exactly as production acts. Containers solve this problem by packaging every WordPress environment, its plugins, its themes, its MU plugins, the entire state into a container. That container we could then launch multiple times. In other words, scale it horizontally. You can't do this with a traditional virtual machine without adding more resources to the machine. But even if you could add more resources, it is incremental. There's no real mechanism for duplicating, doubling the amount of resources you have at any particular time, which is essentially the key to scaling. We also realized that WordPress media can't really scale if it lives inside of containers. Our solution was to take the media off-site by developing a specialized plugin that would move all the uploaded media files into a Google Cloud Storage bucket from which they can be referenced. And as far as WordPress is aware, those files are physically there. But when you move your media files off-site, out of the container, away from the computing, you have this new ability to scale horizontally without having to replicate thousands or tens of thousands of media items that most high traffic WordPress sites have. The database was another challenge. Traditionally, databases will choke under not only high traffic, but also complicated WordPress meta tables. Once your post types become complicated, the database chokes. WordPress is, after all, a remarkable system for putting data models into it. To solve the database scaling issue, after having worked with MariaDB and a few other cluster scaling solutions, we realized the best way to handle a database load is to put it into a cloud resource. Cloud resource for the database challenge means that the cloud service provider will handle scaling your database. And that's a good thing for somebody else to have to handle. But your compute is for you. The biggest revelation was what we call cloud hopping, an ability to utilize AWS for a particular resource like CloudFront, Google Cloud Compute for another part of the cloud that they handle well, which is file storage, and Azure for the computing. Why Azure? Azure simply has the best security. It has the most refined Kubernetes implementation. And honestly, they have done tremendous work over the last few years to make it easier for developers to work on their code. Once again, WordPress is not a CMS. It's an application. And using 12-factor principles is a way to manage that application as you build out your supply chain from your development environment to the cloud where you serve the customers.